Welcome back. This is Good Morning Namibia. Now, the Namibia Trade Forum, the NTF, will be hosting the African Continental Free Trade Area training workshop slated to take place from 17 to 18 June 2025 at a hotel in the Namibian capital. This two-day workshop is designed to boost export readiness and equip our local business, particularly women, youth and MSMEs, with the knowledge and tools to take full advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Mr. Roberth Kaveto, a representative from the Namibia Trade Forum, joins us in studio to tell us more. Good morning, sir, and welcome to Good Morning Namibia.
Good morning, and it's nice to be here.
It's nice to have you, sir.
Yeah.
First things first, we witnessed our first consignment under the African Continental Free Trade Area leave the Walvis Bay Harbour last Monday. How significant a development is that?
Good, thank you very much. And the good part to start with is that the Namibia Trade Forum also played a role in terms of now sending that consignment.
Of course.
That is the issue of now in terms of now getting the company on board and also facilitating that move and also to explain thereof. Now, the issue of the consignment that we have sent through is very significant in the sense that if you look at the meaning of AfCFTA, we are looking at the opening up a big single markets of Africans so that to integrate all this economy to work together. So now it's very significant in the sense that now the exporters themselves, they will benefit in terms of non-tariff barriers that are also being reduced and also to reduce all the tariffs that are supposed to be imposed on the products that we are sending out. So which means now is that this now in terms of economic growth for Namibia as well, job creation as well, is also be in the fast pace in terms of the Namibian economy, simply because we are now exporting more products who are not levied in terms of tariff that's supposed to be imposed on those products. So it's very significant for Namibia and to follow suit as well, because if you look at the trend for South Africa, for example, they've already exported their product as well. That was last year, end of January last year. They exported to Kenya and Ghana as well. So, but the significance thereof is very massive in the South African continent, in the South African country, but also for Namibia, we are saying, look, apart from the soil that we have sent, what more other products that we can also add on so that we can send, learning from other countries that have sent through the same trade agreement, which is the AfCFTA, and also now through the guided trade initiative of the AfCFTA as well.
Thank you for that very important overview. Although there is consensus about the significance of this development, the salt consignment that left for Nigeria last Monday, some are of the view that we should have had a more diversified consignment, and not only one that contained only one item. What's your brief take on that?
It's good. It's true, the sentiment that they have shared, simply because if you look at the comparative advantage for Namibia, we are looking at Namibia have diversified in terms of the product that we can produce, comparing to what South Africa have sent also, like I mentioned earlier on, because we are in the agro-processing, for example. That space, Namibia, is a comparative advantage in that you have fish processing, you have meat processing. Those are the areas that we're supposed to tap in order for us to send those consignments. But it's not, we are not saying we are late, but we are still there. The main important thing for now is for Namibia Trade Forum, in collaboration with the ministry, which is the Ministry of International Relations Trade, to try to push through as well. The most important thing is that the agreement that we have signed as Namibia and has been shelved, have we explained it more to the producers themselves to understand the importance of them trading under this agreement?
That is the crux of the matter, and because of my excitement, I jumped the gun initially. Speak to us about the fundamentals of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and why it's particularly important for Namibia and her people.
It's fundamental. The importance of the AfCFTA is to the extent that the opening up of the markets, before you open up the markets, you have to make sure that the economy, the producers themselves, the industry player, the private sector, they understand how are they going to go about in terms of now play. Because when you say single market, one large single market, you are saying there will be no borders, there will be borderless. Which means that the companies within Namibian context, they have to also to compete with the Nigerian market. Now the question is, how big is the Nigerian market compared to the Namibian market? Now then you look at now twofold or threefold. You look at the SME, MSME, and the big corporate as well. Are they centered enough? Are they seated enough so that they can compete with that? Because the main aim that you are trying to get from there is that market access for the Namibian producers as well, So you want to make sure that the product from Namibia, they have also to enter the Nigerian market.
And of course, not limited to product, services certainly as well.
Yes.
Which brings us to the workshop. What is the purpose? What goals are you looking at?
Yeah, the aim of the workshop is, like I indicated earlier on, is to say, look, we have all these other trade agreements that we have signed. Now we are singling out the AfCFTA in the sense that we have to sensitize the producers themselves. How can they penetrate the market? Now, the main aim of that is also to train them in terms of now, what are the non-tariff barriers that are currently faced? And how do we leverage now from the side of the government now? How do we make sure that these non-tariff barriers are either curtailed in the sense that the producers, they know which type of non-tariff barriers that they're also facing and how do we phase them out? And also the other issues also now, before you trade, before you send your product under the AfCFTA, there are requirements that one have to follow, meaning the company must be registered and all that. Very important is to say the rules of origin certificate that we have to obtain. Now that is now issued by NAMRA. Now we want to take them through to say, how do you obtain that rules of origin? Those are the requirements, because now when you say NTF, we are now bringing the players on board simply because we collaborate with a lot of agencies and also the ministries. We are bringing on board NAMRA, because when you talk of trade, you are looking at the lead agency at the border, for example. If you are now trading with South Africa, the lead agents at the borders, or either the border agency, they should also take part in this training. So we are bringing them so that they can also now equip the traders themselves to say, what are the requirements in terms of you now obtaining the rules of origin certificate? Because this is key in the sense that when you send your product, they will say, where is the product originating from? So the exporters, they have to be equipped with this information. So
and the rules of origin agreement essentially is the passport for those goods that you are sending to the rest of the continent. You mentioned that a couple of times, so what we are addressing are both the tariff barriers but also the non-tariff barriers. Which are examples of the non-tariff barriers?
The non-tariff barriers, you are looking at the issue of quantitative restrictions as well, that are also maybe been implemented at the border, for example. And then you are looking at the license themselves that they might ask you at the border. Because sometimes we always say in trade, if these are not gazetted, for example, drop them from the list in terms of the requirement at the border, so that you don't restrict the traders themselves, because you'll be surprised. Say, okay, I only know in terms of quantitative restrictions, I'm supposed to export this much. But when you reach at the border, they are telling you, look, there's this license that they're also missing and all that. But according to the requirement, those are not gazetted. So we are saying all these requirements which are not gazetted, drop them off from the list so that you make sure that it is expedited in terms of now exporting these products and make it easy for the trader, because they are already stressed in terms of obtaining all these other certificates and all that requirements, that permits that they need. But then when they reach at the border, they're supposed to be now happy in terms of now them trading across and make it easier for them to do business. But then all these non-tariff barriers are also in place that are also now implemented. And then you have the tariff ones, the one that we know already. Tariff is nothing else but these taxes that are also added on top of the prices that you're supposed already to pay. So all these ones should be harmonized and made it easy and available to the traders so that it's easy for them to trade.
Harmonization of our policies and of our laws on the continent is, of course, critical. However, on account of these being sovereign states on the African continent, however much they may have ratified the agreement, how big a hurdle is harmonization of our policies and laws from our perspective?
It's a little bit tricky in the sense that the agencies were involved in terms of harmonizing some of the procedures. Because when you talk about harmonization, you are looking at the requirements of the exporter for them to access the market. Let me give an example of permits. When you are issuing permits, and then you have, let's say, let me give an example of Ministry of Agriculture, for example. Under Ministry of Agriculture, you have agencies that are falling under it. You have an Namibia Agronomic Board, and you have the Mid Board as well. But then you are saying all these ones, they are issuing permits. Now, and the question is, on the side of the traders now, how easy are they to access or either to get these permits? Now, what do I mean by that? Is that in terms of accessibility. You have Ministry of Agriculture, those agencies, they are scattered all over. When they are scattered, which means that the trader have to move now from this office to the other office to the other office to get those permits. The question is, why don't you bring all these services on one spot?
Create
if
a
they
one-stop
need be.
shop.
Yes, if they need be. And also, let's say if you are in a one building like the way we are now, where we are here, let's say on the first floor is where Namibia Agronomic Board is seated. On the second floor is where Mid-Board is seated. And then maybe on the ground floor is where we are now DVS, which is a division of veterinary services, because they also issue permits in terms of importation or exportations of goods that you might also want to bring to Namibia. So that you get your service at once, from first floor, or either from the second floor, the second, until the ground floor.
I'm so happy you're raising that, because harmonization does not only relate to the intra-continental laws and policies, but also within our very country.
Yes.
The particulars of the workshop. So who is it targeted towards, and how can people subscribe? Is there an investment payable? How does it work?
Very easy. We simplified it in the sense that there's no prescription fee in terms of for you to participate, because we have also to acknowledge that we also brought on board the development partners, which is GIZ. They are funding that the training as well, the workshop, and they are the ones also who are bringing the consultant on board. So the consultant will unpack all this. We have to acknowledge that and to appreciate that they're also coming on board as development partners. There's no fees that are required for the participant to participate, and also the RSVP that they're busy with now as of current. We have just to go on, either it's on a Google form, or either you can can send an email to our office, that is either at admin@ntf.org.na, or either you can also send an email to the CEO at ntf.org.na, or either alternatively you can also send an email to policyanalyst@ntf.org.na. So those are the platform where you can also access, apart from the one that you can go on the Google map that you can complete. And then we receive that RSVP.
Google form?
Yes, there's also a Google form. And also, most importantly, also is our marketing officers on board, so that they can also access that website, and they can also send that RSVP so that they can also participate. Now, that is now the issue of participation. There's no fees involved. Now, the other part to say the targets, we are targeting across all.
So what if all 3 million of us subscribe? Do you have enough capacity?
Yes. In terms of now, you see, we have a pool of companies that we've identified. Because now the target that you mentioned, so we are targeting those ones who are ready to export and the potential exporters themselves. And then you have the SMEs. Now, remember, the target here is not only for those ones who are exporting already. You bring the diverse of the SMEs, big corporates, them, so that you bring them together.
Both goods and services, or only goods for this round?
Both goods and services. Yeah. Because we also are going to unpack also the protocols on goods, the protocol on trading services as well, that talks about now digital trade and all that. So which means that all SMEs, MSMEs, then you have big corporates, they are all invited.
Out of curiosity, what would be a typical example of a service that you could export under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement?
There are quite a number of it in terms of now the service that you might provide. Let's say look at the tourism industry, for example. That is a service on its own already. So now, because the reason why I mentioned that is when you look at now the agreement that we have signed, we have opened up that market to say others, they can also participate. Now, the issue is that how can now Namibia also export the same service to other countries? So we have already opened up that industry in terms of trading services.
Yeah. Any brief final thoughts before we let you go?
It is to encourage SMEs, to encourage big corporates to come in numbers to this event and also participate. The issue is that the government is extending their arm to say, please participate, raise the concern in terms of trade barriers that you are facing as of current, or either going forward, so that we should know and try to work on it. And also knock on the door, most importantly for Namibia Trade Forum, so that we can interact. We want to revive that. And we are encouraging SMEs also to come and ask questions at the same time under this training that we are anticipating to.
Thank you for the comprehensive and elaborate update. Thank you for providing those insights, and may the workshop next week be a resounding success.
Thank you very much.
Representative from the Namibia Trade Forum, Mr. Roberth Kaveto, talking to us about a fundamentally important two-day workshop that will be underway in the Namibian capital next week, and it focuses on teaching Namibians how to export their goods and services, particularly if you're operating within the SME sector under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement.